variance is going to say that I want to find a way include the whole city of just like 10% of the population of the city. So it's a very small.
That's pretty good. 270 people.
Unfortunately, well, the number is that it's not all
Okay.
other suburbs around
Well, anyways, one lady said, whatever happened to those, like, when you laminate the laminated cards, we used to hang on our refrigerators that said what you
well,
put.
they had there were refrigerator magnets. As a matter of fact, that's something
Are you going to stay for the council?
I was going to say for it
I want to thank everybody for coming to the January 16th meeting. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mr. King.
Here.
Mrs. Sachs. Mr. Cooney.
Here.
Mrs. Wise.
Here.
Mr. Rock.
Here.
Ms. Marshall. Ms. Weiser. Here.
Is there any motion to excuse Ms. Marshall?
So moved. Seconded.
Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. King.
Aye.
Mrs. Sachs. Mr. Cooney.
Aye.
Mr. Rock.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall. Ms. Marshall. I'm sorry. Ms. Weiser. Aye.
You skipped me.
That's what there's something. Ms. Wise.
Aye. Will everybody please stand for the pledge of allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are now going to discuss the reading and disposal of the journal. We have the minutes from December 18th first. Is there a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Is there a second? I will second them. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. King.
Aye.
Mrs. Sachs. Mr. Cooney.
Aye.
Mrs. Wise.
Aye.
Mr. Rock.
Aye.
Ms. Weiser. Aye.
We also have the minutes from the January 2nd meeting. Is there a motion to accept those?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. King.
Aye.
Mrs. Sachs. Mr. Cooney.
Aye.
Mrs. Wise.
Aye.
Mr. Rock.
Aye.
Ms. Weiser. Aye.
Okay, both minutes are approved. Are there any comments from the audience? Okay, there are none. Reports and communications from the mayor and the taking of action thereon. Mayor, do you have any report or communications?
Yes, I have a report. Thank you. I'm pleased to announce that the administration is organizing our city's first Sustainable Home Fair, featuring vendors of sustainable products and services and organizations who offer programs to assist homeowners. The fair will also be featuring workshops. The Sustainable Home Fair will be located in the gyms and classrooms here at the Wiley Middle School building at 2181 Miramar Boulevard. This will be on Sunday, April 21st, 2024 from 1 to 4 p.m. The Sustainable Home Fair is aimed towards University Heights homeowners and others who want information about how to make their homes more energy efficient, less costly to operate, and more sustainable. The Sustainable Home Fair is organized with the assistance of the Citizens Advisory Committee on Sustainability. The reason for the Sustainable Home Fair is, as As we'll recall, in June of 2022, the city passed a resolution to become a Power Clean Future PCFO community, and Power Clean Future Ohio PCFO community, with a goal to reduce our carbon emissions by 30% of 2010 levels by 2030. In 2023, the city conducted a greenhouse gas inventory with the assistance of PCFO. The inventory showed that one of the greatest opportunities the city has to reduce emissions is to help homeowners make their homes more energy efficient. We have reached out to a number of organizations and vendors, including the Home Repair Resource Center, Cleveland Restoration Society, Solar United Neighbors, and the Cuyahoga County Department of Sustainability. We do have an information and sign-up page up on the city website, universityites.com/sustainable-home-fair. Since the last meeting, I have administered the oath of office to Mike Cicero to continue in his role as county prosecutor and assistant law director. As folks are aware, Luke McConville is concluding his time as law director on March 31st, 2024. The job posting for law director is on the city website with applications due by 4 p.m. Monday, January 29, 2024. The CIC will meet on January 17, 2024 at 7 p.m. That's tomorrow here at Wiley. Among the agenda items are the governance issues, which take precedence over all new projects. Chick-fil-A went to ARB last week and received approval with conditions. Chick-fil-A is not on tonight's agenda. You should expect to see it on the agenda of the next regular council meeting of February 5, 2024. Finally, please mark your calendars. The 2024 State of the City address will be Thursday, April 11th, 2024 at 6 p.m. at the University Heights Library, rooms 1 and 2. Thank you. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor. Reports and communications from City Council and taking of action thereon. There is no report for City Council right now. Does anybody else from City Council have anything they would like to say? Yeah, Ms. Weiser?
I have a question. A number of residents contacted me regarding the Alexander Shoal. I did request from the law director a copy of the agreement that was signed, and because that's a public document, I presume we can't speak publicly about it. Is this correct? Mr. McConville?
Well, you're of course allowed to speak publicly about anything that you choose as a public official. You have First Amendment rights. I would note that the settlement that is set forth in that agreement is in the process of being administered. As the agreement notes, the federal court has jurisdiction over enforcement of the settlement agreement. And I would encourage council members to seek information in executive session first prior to making public comment on the status of the Alexander Shoal project, and then leaving it all to you in your own judgment as to what you would feel prudent to share. That would be my ask of council at this juncture.
Thank you, Mr. McConville. I think I'll withhold my comments until after we might have an executive session regarding it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Weiser. Reports and communications from directors in the Department of Finance, Law, Public Safety, Public Service. Department of Finance.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Want to give council an update on how 2023 ended up. These are obviously unaudited numbers, but we did close out the year so that we could open the new year 2024. So I'll just run over some general numbers in terms of our balances, revenues, and expenses. So for all funds, on an all funds basis, we started out the year with $10,016,058. We added to that over the course of 2023 by $23,053,955. Our expenses, again, this is for all funds, $22,324,090. So our unexpended balance went to $10,745,923. So that was an increase of approximately $730,000. For the general fund, we started the year with a beginning balance of $6,540,810. Our revenue for the general fund for 2023 is $17,207,044. Our expenses were $17,743,245. So our unexpended balance dropped to $6,004,609. There's a couple of points to remember for that. We did advance money at the end of the year to cover some of the receipts that we had not received by the end of the year. So those get categorized as an expense. That money will come back in this year as revenue. So we should get that money back. As of the end of the year, we're owed money for 3 big projects, 2 of which are with the Northeast Ohio Sewer District. 2 sewer jobs. One was approximately $339,000. Another one was approximately $132,000. And we're owed approximately $300,000 to $400,000 for the final settlement for the Cedar Road project from ODOT. I do not have those final settlement numbers. So we're somewhere between $750,000 and $800,000 that will be coming in as reimbursements. These are for jobs that we already paid for. We had to pay up front and then submit for reimbursement. So we should have $800,000 in revenue coming in probably, I would suspect, by the end of the first quarter. And that's all we have for tonight.
So, Mr. Kennedy, those are booked as receivables right now in
Yes.
2024? Okay.
Yeah. We will be starting the audit in the next couple of weeks, the audit for 2023. Right now, we're just finishing up end of the year payroll processing, W-2s, 1099s, that sort of thing. So, all good.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Kennedy? All right, Mr. McConville?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I plan to provide a report to Council in executive session this evening. I'd like to provide Council an update on the eminent domain litigation with Yabi, along with an update on the status of the bankruptcy litigation in connection with University Square. And we'll add the third topic of discussing the administration of the settlement agreement with the Alexander School.
Okay, public safety. Police?
No report, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Chief Rogers. Is there anything from fire?
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Good evening, Council. Earlier today, we sent out the monthly report for the fire department for December. We probably won't have one for January. We'll be working on the annual report. Get that out to you in the first quarter. We're approaching probably our 10th year or so in training firefighter safety and survival during the winter months. This has expanded greatly to not only our neighboring departments, but the entire Heights-Hillcrest region over the last few years, with thanks to our training officer, Captain Robinson. So you may see over the course of this month a lot of fire agency vehicles over here at Wiley. We're fortunate to be using the space still here, and we'll probably be putting about 100 firefighters through the training over the course of this month. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Weiser?
Before you go, Chief. In view of the conditions, in terms of like weather conditions, has fire or police done anything in terms of like looking at warming centers for our area, or if they're even needed?
I'm keeping a notice or an eye on the notices from the county about warming centers, but not had a need for anything internally here, no.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the chief? Thank you. Okay, service.
Yes, just briefly, this past Friday, we did our final round of leaf collection for the season. The final leaf truck is being taken out of service and being retrofitted for a plow truck as we speak. So we are now full blown into our winter snow removal season. So that's all I have to report tonight.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the service director? Okay. Building?
Good evening, Vice Mayor, Mayor, Council. I want to first of all say thank you all, and Luke, Hall Director, for the good time I had here the last 4 months. You've all been very gracious, easy to work with, and responsive, and so I wanted to thank you for the experience. And I want to introduce your new building official. He's been in the seat now for a little over a week. His name is Mark Patterson. Some of you have met him. He just spent the last decade in Beach City, right next door, comes very highly vetted and recommended, and we've received no hiccups with him. I think you'll be very pleased with him. I'm going to allow him to just introduce himself.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Vice Mayor, Council. My name is Mark Patterson. As John said, I currently live in the city of Mentor with my wife of 42 years, Roberta. I have 2 daughters, Courtney and Melanie. Courtney actually lives in the city of UH with her husband, Joe McCorney. I'm looking forward to continuing what John has started here, getting things back in order. And I appreciate the warm welcome I've received from the mayor and the staff. And I look forward to working with the other safety services to do what we're supposed to do.
Thank you. We look forward to working with you also. Okay, housing and community development.
Good evening. I'd like to report that we will find out about the status of the TLCI grant that we submitted for Taylor Road this Friday through NUACA. Things are kind of slow with the department at this time of year, but things will be picking up with the inspections of the multi-unit apartment buildings in the city, which will begin within the next month. That's all.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the housing director? Thanks. Mayor, are there any updates with engineering?
Well, we have anything I would say with engineering would have to probably address it with item A, as we have no city engineer.
And communications and civic engagement?
I have a report from Mike Cook, the Director of Communications and Civic Engagement. It is as follows. The next issue of Mosaic will hit mailboxes in the 3rd week of February. The 2024 winter-spring issue will include the University Heights Business Directory and a feature article from Alex Fletcher from Faces of Orthodoxy. The magazine will update residents on the launch of our Threads account and upcoming history presentation, the State of the City address, and the Sustainable Home Fair. The issue will also include our regular updates from the Cleveland Heights University Heights School District, the Heights Libraries, and John Carroll University. That concludes the report.
Thank you. Economic development?
I'll reserve my comments for executive session. That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Okay. We'll now go to the reading and disposition of ordinances, resolutions, motions, and consideration of agenda items. The first agenda item is Ordinance 2024-01, authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Wallace Pancher Group for the provision of engineering services as city engineer and declaring an emergency on second reading. We discussed this in depth at the last meeting. We asked that Wallace Pancher Group come back with an updated contract. I guess, Mayor, you had a discussion with them. We did get an updated contract. Was there anything in addition to the contract that you wanted to state for the record?
Certainly. There is a memo in the packet, but I think there are a few things that we ought to go over from that memo, and then beyond that, with her. JV quota retainer, but only hourly pricing. This was tabled at the last council meeting. We did have members who sought to apply a best and lowest standard instead of a qualifications-based selection standard, which is the standard for a professional services contract. I noted in the memo as recently as September 23, and since the revision of the professional services ordinance, the city retains Starfish Computer Corporation for managed IT services. They were the best and also top bidder at their bid price was $6,215 a month. The city did not endeavor to reduce that bid price, and in spite of some commentary here at council, this is all providers not done that, and I do not see where it would be done here now. I do want to go over some of the some of the changes to the proposed agreement that we made since the last council meeting. It did come up at council clarification with item 1K regarding the engineer and his attendance at the city council committee meetings. And it now states that the city engineer shall attend all regular city council meetings. The city engineer shall the city engineer shall attend city council committee meetings only when requested by council. The city engineer shall attend any additional public or administrative meetings only when requested by the mayor. Though it was raised by council with no specific request to make a change, I had the third whereas clause changed to specify now that the annual renewal of up to 5 years is by the city, meaning therefore the city and its processes and not merely the mayor. The previous version of the contract made it look like the mayor solely did that. But customarily for engineering, and there seems to be no reason to change this, the renewal would be proposed by the mayor and then subject to council approval. So this is in there now to clear that up. Mr. Cheney always brought his price list back and was always put back before the council for reappointment. So it was not intended, and we did not want to leave the contract to be interpreted to suggest that the council had this and this only opportunity to approve Wallace Pancher, and then for the next up to 5 years, the mayor would be doing those renewals on his or her own. Finally, there's an hourly rate chart that adds project manager an hourly rate of $140. Project manager is someone who's knowledge and experience in the public works sector, but does not have a technical or engineering degree. This was an addition that was requested by Wallace Pancher since the council meeting. And then finally, over the 2B rate chart is adjusted to reflect the inclusion of non-retainer item 1P subject to the rate chart. That just fixes a typo where 1P wasn't added and should have been. It's a non-retainer item, so anything that's in 1P is subject to being a non-retainer item and subject to that price list. It is imperative that the city engineering contract be entered at once without any further delay by the council. As stated last meeting, the administration requires the input of a city engineer to complete the administration's proposed 2024 city budget. Since the meeting, the resultant delay by council has caused ODOT to postpone PID 109413 traffic signal project from fiscal year 2025 to fiscal year 2026, citing specifically to the lack of of having a city engineer. Numerous other engineering projects are at a standstill and await advancement. Hopefully no further projects are postponed by another year or lost altogether. As to the latter, the future is in question as to a capital budget request for the park restrooms that administration applied for to the state of Ohio in December, when the city currently has no engineer to assist in the lobbying for that project. Other applications the administration planned to apply for, such as updating the request for a federal earmark for a sewer project, cannot be made without engineering input. And finally, the delay in the transition to our next engineering firm has delayed the transition from GPD to Wallace Pancher, which may yet require a separate agreement to be entered with GPD, depending on the scope and extent of the work to be done, undetermined until our new engineering firm meets with our old engineering firm, which will not happen until the new firm is formally authorizing the mayor to enter the contract with Wallace Pancher for municipal engineering services as modified in the packet at the rate of $6,000 a month. I have a few more things to say about this that aren't in the memo, that have, apparently since come up. And it was brought to my attention, I asked Dan Wallace at Wallace Pancher if they could prepare some information with respect to the services that they provide in 3 other cities here in, not University Heights, but in Cuyahoga County. Wallace Pancher inherited through its acquisition of McKay engineering contracts in Fairview Park, Middleburg Heights, Rocky River, and I want to pass out a chart that I got late this afternoon that has some comparisons on here that I think we should go over that may be helpful in assessment for the council to assess the appropriateness of the fee, or perhaps alternatives if we want to narrow the scope of work. It would not be my recommendation that we narrow the scope of work, but I nevertheless want to go over what is different in the University Heights scope of work for engineering services as done traditionally here in University Heights compared to what this firm does for Fairview Park, for Middleburg Heights, and for Rocky River. The items that are highlighted in yellow, basically this scope tracks the RFQ, which is still on the city's website and is available there for viewing, but it also tracks items that are specifically in the contract as they model their contract over what we were requesting in the RFQ. So I would note, highlighted in yellow, that items with regard to the review of engineering plans, our scope of work had that included en masse, but in Fairview Park, Middleburg Heights, and Rocky River, those are all done at an hourly rate, an hourly fee for those engineering plans. Similarly, as I move down to item D, oversight and compliance with the city's stormwater management program. And I can lump that in with item F, the assist with the oversight and compliance with the city's Ohio EPA, MS4, and any RSD permits that in Fairview Park, Middleburg Heights, and Rocky River, Wallace Pancher does not do that service for them, that though they are qualified to do it and can do it, that in those cities it is either the service department with the service director or the building department through the building commissioner, or perhaps both, that handles those aspects. So anything regarding stormwater management, stormwater compliance, and then the oversight of these permits, they do not handle those things in those cities. That is included in our RFQ scope of work and the scope of work that's in the contract. Additionally, though they will assist with grant applications for opportunities identified by the city, identifying grant opportunities is not something they typically do or would have in their retainer with Fairview Park, Middleburg Heights, or Rocky River. That is something we included in our proposal because, or rather our request for qualifications, because that's something that we had been doing previously with GP and Mr. Juni. Moving on then to item I, the reviewing the designs and observing the construction of public improvements performed by the city when requested by the mayor. This is not within the scope of work in Fairview Park, Middleburg Heights, or Rocky River. This is a fairly broad item that is in the scope of work here in University Heights. But in the notes that hourly fees paid for design reviews and observation are done in those other three cities, separate from the retainer. I would then turn to items K1 and K2 with regard to attending city council meetings and attending council committee meetings. As you can see, only Fairview Park does Wallace, Pancher / McKay attend every city council meeting. Middleburg Heights and Rocky River, the city engineer does not regularly attend the meeting. This is something we included because that is something that Mr. Chuney had done for us. But if you think about it, Mr. Chuney has been the city engineer here for many years. He was also and still today is the city engineer in Beechwood. Our council meetings are the same night as Beechwood's council meetings, and Mr. Chuney was generally here because by agreement and by custom, he attended our meetings and was only absent from these meetings, was only in Beechwood rather, and then was absent from our meetings if there was a specific matter on the Beechwood agenda there where he was summoned to attend that meeting. So, that is something that we've done for a very long time. And, maybe that's something that we do want to look at. I happen to like having our engineer here at our meetings, just like we've gone back to having our chief building official here at our meetings. The services of a professional surveyor, that's something that was included in the scope of work here in University Heights. That's something GPD did as well. Wallace Pancher does not provide that service as part of their consulting agreement, that is as part of the retainer agreement in either Fairview Park, Middleburg Heights, or Rocky River, but they do those services. They're simply paid a separate fee for them. So those are all items that are there is one more, the asset management program. While they do GIS mapping from available sources, candidly, it doesn't appear that Fairview Park, Middleburg Heights, or Rocky River has, at least not to their knowledge, and maybe it's only because they don't do it. They are unaware of what asset management program any of those cities has. Doesn't mean they don't have one, but they're not familiar with it. They don't do that. It's not part of their retainer. It is part of the retainer here. Finally, some things that are not on this chart that I would add. In none of these cities, Fairview Park, Middleburg Heights, or Rocky River, is there any kind of cap where we would go out, where they would go out to bid if the design is going to be $50,000 or more. Basically, by contracting with these cities to be the city engineer, they get all the projects. That is something that we did change last year. We now go out to bid for these items. When they're $50,000 or more, that is not a feature in any of those three cities, and it is a factor. Finally, you may be asking, what are the fees in Fairview Park and Middleburg Heights and Rocky River? And I will tell you, with all the things that are left out of the retainer, Fairview Park pays $3,800 a month, Rocky River pays $3,900 a month, and Middleburg Heights pays $5,000 a month. These rates tend to be a little bit lower than they would be if they were to bid these now, if they were not currently their clients and would come up today to bid, partly because they've been attempting to honor an agreement with respect that McKay previously had of all of these cities regarding the rate of increase of fees over time. They have and continue to endeavor to honor that the arranged increased rate of engineering fees, the retainer amount, the hourly fees are tied hand in hand with the rates of increases either of union employees or administrative employees. So, put another way, here in University Heights, we just had a 4% raise for union employees and administrative employees. If a 4% raise had happened in Fairview, Middleburg, or Rocky River, then their rates would have gone up by 4% as well. And that's done by custom. It's not in their contract per se, but it is something that they have done and done over many years. The McKays did that before Wallace Pancher took them over, and thus far Wallace Pancher has sought to honor that. So I think in light of the much broader scope of work that we have compared to the other three cities, the feature that we now have with regard to the mandatory going out to bid for matters that are for design matters, engineering matters that would be $50,000 or more. That the $6,000 that has been quoted to us is competitive and appropriate compared to what they're doing in the other cities. And I think we should, go ahead and, in light of the additional information, approve Wallace Pancher to be our city engineer. It is an initial one-year contract. It is renewable after a year. We can renew it or not renew it. Or, if we feel as if we're not getting our money's worth, we can say so and see if there's some other arrangement we can reach. But, we're in a place where, we need engineering services without further delay. We have an excellent firm that is here prepared still to provide them to us. And it is my hope that the City Council approves this evening on emergency this ordinance so that we can get them to work without further delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually have a lot to say before I open it up to everybody else. Trying to think where to start. Thank you for this chart here. It's actually very helpful. I'm disappointed that Wallace Pancher actually did not come back with a lower bid. I was hoping that they were. I am actually very confident that they are an extremely qualified company and would do an excellent job here. We are much smaller than Fairview Park, Middleburg Heights, and Rocky River, even with the pieces that they are doing for them, or they are not doing for them. I did do, as I emailed to everybody else, I looked at Beechwood and even the current costs of some cities, such as Shaker Heights, which is posted on their website, the current costs. And Shaker Heights is much bigger than University Heights. They are still much, much lower than $6,000. In addition, GPD for the last 3 years, I looked at the history, we paid, besides the $12,000, which I agree is very, very low, $1,000 a month. I was never¬ to pay that. We paid about $200,000 average to that company per year. And many cities have a cap where they are expected to bid against other companies. It's not just University Heights that has that ordinance. Many other cities have that as well. I looked into that. So I have a couple questions. Did you interview, since only 3 companies submitted an RFQ, did you interview the other 2 companies also?
I did not.
And why didn't you? Because it seems that, I'm glad that Mr. Rock asked for the other RFQs. I mean, I read through all of them. It seemed that they were also very qualified companies. If there was only 3 of them, why did you and Mr. Pennington not decide to interview them as well?
Well, it's qualifications-based selection. If we interviewed our first choice first and saw that this was going to be a good fit, and saw no reason to interview the others. If we had found that it wasn't going to work out with the first one, then we would have moved on to the second one. And that's why. Mr. Pennington, anything you care to add to that?
Well, there's also familiarity with the various firms. I, in my previous dealings, had dealt with both LJB and Osborne, well, Osborne's personnel as they worked for other firms, and was quite familiar with those people. And with that, having, what Mary had already indicated there, that Wallace Pancher was our first choice, we felt that interviewing them was the way to go. We felt we needed to go on to Osborne or to LJB, something we could have done at that time.
So I'm disappointed that you didn't interview the other two. They seem just as qualified. It's also not true that engineer in training was going to be the only engineer for our city. That's just not true. I mean, the other engineers in that company would be just as involved. And if you think of it in any professional setting, I mean, when I have auditors, that's first of all how they learn, number one. And number two is you have the first year auditors that are supervised by the manager, that are supervised by the senior, that are supervised by the partners. And they all work in tandem. So when you only have three candidates that are applying, you should have interviewed all of them. And the price difference was so drastic that I would have hoped you would have done your due diligence, especially for our residents, because I just keep thinking about the residents, because that $6,000, as you said, is going to increase 4%, 4%, 4% every single year. And it's a huge difference, because even from 4 years ago, the difference of those prices of those 11 cities was $1,650 all the way to $3,250. And now we're talking about, you're recommending a $6,000 per month retainer. And that's besides the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're paying on top of it. So I was hoping that Wallace would come back lower, and I would be comfortable with that. But then when I saw the other bids, and I was really hoping that you interviewed them. I was really, really hoping you interviewed them, and you saw something that just you couldn't live with. I'm really uncomfortable. The other thing that I'm extremely uncomfortable with is that you could have come to us in November or December and said, here are the engineering firms. You've had no engineer for 2 weeks. You can't come to us and tell us that council is at fault for not having an engineer. It's not true. You knew for 6 months, basically, that GPD wasn't coming back. And it's not council's fault that GPD wasn't coming back. You knew that you could have had a budget from December 31st. As of December 31st, you decided not to prepare the budget. GPD could have also done the roads by December 31st. For whatever reason, GPD didn't do the roads by December 31st. They have the list. They know, I can tell you what roads need to be done. We have a list, 1 through, I don't know, whatever, 90 roads or whatever. You pick the next 5 roads or whatever. I just don't know how much they cost. We have it right there. It's not council's fault that those things aren't done right now. So I'm really having a lot of heartburn that these other 2 firms weren't interviewed. I really want them interviewed. And I'm having a hard time swallowing $6,000 right now when they weren't interviewed, when I see what Beechwood researched, a few years ago, and I'm also really upset that Wallace didn't come down at all. I think that, I don't know if you told them not to come down, I hope not, but any firm that really wants our business would have come down a little bit. Just a little bit. Mr. Rock?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. This spreadsheet's helpful. This is the scope that was prepared in the state of request for qualifications, in which all 3 firms who submitted had the same opportunity to prepare a price against that scope. And as I look back at Mr. Chuney's professional service agreement with the city from 2021, the scope is very similar. So we're not getting anything above and beyond that we did receive previously. As I look at this, first thing I see in the mayor's memo is that, excuse me, for Osborne Engineering, they quoted $2,900 a month, so it's less than half of this Wallace Pancher group. Retainer items, and then with hourly non-retainer items. So I'm not sure if that was a disqualifying measure because they included non-retainer hourly items, but so did everybody else. And then listed here with most of the day-to-day performed by the engineer in training, not a professional engineer. Well, as I look at this statement of qualifications that their firm had prepared, the principal in charge of this work is a PE, professional engineer, so he is certified. The project manager, also known as the city engineer, who will do all of our day-to-day, Mr. Gerson, he's a PE, a PS, he is certified. It was the assistant city engineer, who would be like the protege, to do more mundane work. It's the one that's not certified. And that's similar to how most engineering firms, architecture firms, etc., operate. You know, I'm a licensed architect, but my billing hours, or my billable rate is too high to do some of the mundane tasks. So I hand it off to an intern who can do data entry, put things in the computer, where I'm more of a high-level person. This is exactly the model that I'm seeing here. The city engineer is the licensed professional. Person under him is the one in training. Additionally, they provided staff that all have PEs, you know, Mr. Pfeiffer, Ms. Sverko, Mr. Lewis, Mr. Kuhn, all PEs. So to say that this particular firm is not licensed or they're not engineers is just not true. So I think you should take a look at that. And again, the second phase after receiving the statements of qualifications is the bidding and negotiation phase. And in that phase is where you negotiate. And you chose not to do that with Wallace Pancher. You could have gone to Osborne. If you were not happy with the team, that's an opportunity to say, hey, you know, we like your price. We have a concern with these particular team members. Osborne Engineering is a firm of 100 people. So perhaps these were the qualified staff members that were available to work on a particular work. But there could have been others. It's not uncommon for owners to contact us and say, we love your team. It looks like your project manager may not have the right qualifications. Can you swap them out? And we do. That's typical. Second thing in your letter here is that LJB did not quote the retainer, but only the hourly pricing. So I don't know if that was disqualifying or not, as to why you did not choose them. And I look at their statement of qualifications, and that's correct. They only give their hourly rate, but they were following the instructions in your request for qualifications. In your request for qualifications, page 2, item 4, under competitive bidding, under competitive pricing, states that to list an hourly rate and cost for all pertinent tasks, including overhead and profit for items 1A through M, the monthly retainer items. So they did. They followed your instructions and listed the hourly rate to perform those tasks. It wasn't clear that you were looking for a lump sum that Osborne and Wallace Pancher did provide. It wasn't required. So to put in the memo here that that's why you didn't choose them, I take exception to that. I'm sure they do too. They were just following the instructions. And again, during the bidding and negotiation phase, perhaps you contact them and say, hey, what's the monthly retainer lump sum instead of the hourly? That's what you do in negotiation. And that didn't happen here. So it would be irresponsible of me to approve this when it's more than double the cost and the same level of, in terms of capabilities, and it's the same scope. It would be irresponsible of me to approve this when your second best pick or your third best pick, well, we know one of the picks is half the cost. And you just have to make a phone call to find out what the third one is. So this is discouraging. I feel that if we accept the bid from Wallace Pancher to do the same level of work with the same capabilities at double the cost, we're going to find that when the design phase of projects come through, we're going to see consistency, and that their proposal to us will be double than what's market. If Osborne Engineering has given us rates that are market and appropriate, and Wallace Pancher has given us 2x that, at this juncture, how do we expect them to give us fair proposals for the actual design work, which is the real money, which is really where we're spending money? They're more expensive, and good for them. But it's our role here to pick lowest and best. I see all three being capable and qualified to do this type of work. So we're already getting the best crop of engineering services in Cuyahoga County. We already have the best. Now we go for lowest and best. I don't know LJB's lump sum because that wasn't provided, it wasn't requested, but if they were to provide that, I would like to see how that looks up against Osborne Engineering. We already know Osborne's half the cost. So I'm not inclined to approve this tonight. It would be, again, irresponsible of me. This is our job. This is our checks and balances here. This is what we're supposed to be doing. Thank you.
Ms. Weiser?
Oddly enough, I'm conflicted. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. McConville. The pick of an engineer is the mayor's pick, right?
Correct.
Okay. So the only thing we're talking about is the contract for that pick, but not the pick itself. In essence, he could pick anybody he wants for an engineer.
Correct.
Okay. The problem I have with this is twofold. I think Mr. Rock has made a number of very good points about the other bidders. I certainly, engineering is not a total area of expertise, although I know some stuff about it. However, I just need to make some corrections for the record. Number one, right now in the city of University Heights, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. McConville, the mayor has the ability to issue a professional services contract up to his spending limit of $15,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the statements that we cannot do the roads, we cannot do the bid for whatever, we're holding all this stuff up because we're holding up the contract, is perfectly appropriate only if the contract determines who the city engineer is. On an hourly basis, even being charged $300 an hour, that's 50 hours worth of work that could be done. And I am quite sure that would give us a roads program, so the budget is not being held up by the council. The budget is being held up by the fact that one does not wish to issue a professional services contract up to the mayor's spending authority, and it could be done. That's one. The vice mayor has made a very good point. There was a request to start the budget process in September. Council was told, no, gotta wait till November after the election. Again, Mr. Juni was still the city engineer for the city of University Heights. One thing I know about Joe is he doesn't leave the city out to hang. And he certainly could have provided that whole thing for your budget if you wish to actually get the budget going in 2023 when it should have been figured and to council by now. We still don't have a budget, which means we have less and less time to review that budget before the required date of March 31st. That's your choice. However, you cannot blame the council for that. That is all your choice. For once, take responsibility for your actions. Those are yours, live with them. We all have to live with ours. It's about time to grow up and suck it up. Quite bluntly, that's not the reason for this. The other thing I said when we first talked about this, and I believe I brought this up about another circular discussion that this council had with you, is if you would begin to treat the council with some respect and be willing to discuss things with us instead of handing us things and saying, here, approve this. We are not your approving body. We approve contracts, but we have a secondary thing. I know what you gave the Charter Review Committee. I know your view is that council exists to turn around and just say yes to whatever your vision is. But we have a responsibility to the city and to the residents. You may not like it. You can sit there and shake your head, and that's fine. That's your belief, but live with the results of your belief. If you worked with us, if you even brought this sheet 2 weeks ago, we might have been further in conversation. But that, of course, is not your style with the council. And I really wish you would consider doing things maybe slightly differently. There's an old saying, if you keep doing things the same way you always did them, you're going to keep getting the same results. Council's here to work with you. It's about time you work with council. But please, do not say that this council is holding up the budget, the road stuff. You have the ability to issue a professional services contract with an engineer up to $15,000 and have it done. If that's what's holding up your budget, get it done. We're waiting for the budget.
I don't think it's fair to represent to the public that we could just enter into a contract with Wallace Pancher for up to $15,000 to work on the budget. I have no reason to think that they would do that. It may come to a point where, like with IT, we're going to have an emergency engineer. And with IT, we did that for 2-3 years. And we ended up coming back every 3 months to approve the next amount because it was in excess of $15,000. I don't want to see that happen with the engineer, and I don't believe that this engineering firm is going to be interested in doing that. So this engineering firm, from my conversations with them, stands by the amount that they have offered to do the services for. They are interested in having the proposal accepted. Alternatively, we can reject their proposal. By we, I mean that's all of you. I've put this in front of you by ordinance, and as the law director reflected, this is my appointment as the mayor. This is the appointment I've put before you. This isn't a menu of this one, or this one. And there are numerous things I did not put in writing with regard to the other two firms. They are professional firms, but there were certain things that did not measure up with in their proposals compared to what we were doing. Yeah, I could call them and ask them if they could reassign people, but maybe I would have done that if I didn't already have a #1 candidate that had what we wanted and had what the administration wanted. If I didn't have Wallace Pancher as the top bidder, then I may have gone to one of the other two to see what we could salvage from what they had bid, to see what other arrangement we could make. But we didn't have to get to that point because we interviewed our top candidate and we got the one that we wanted. Now, under the ordinances, the mayor shall appoint the engineer based on qualifications for a 1-year term. Such appointment or renewal shall be subject to confirmation by a majority vote of the then elected members of the council. The engineer serves at the pleasure of the mayor. This is all by ordinance. It is not by ordinance that I bring you all three and say, well, what do you think? It's by ordinance that I bring you my appointment. It's like any other appointment where I bring you an appointment and you vote them up or down. And if you vote them down, well, then I'll look for another appointment. And if you vote them up, which is what I hope you'll do here, then we'll have a city engineer and we'll get to work.
So Mayor, I just want to clarify one thing. The IT process was a process with a committee, and the only reason that it took so long is because the committee reviewed continuously the RFQ, and we were waiting for a contract to be signed by you. So let's just get that clear. Secondly, I have a question.
That's not what's clear. You're muddying the water.
Nothing is muddying.
Bay Point came in at
Excuse me,
$3,900
I'm talking.
$62.15, and that's, we go with the top bid. I have the bid documents in my office. Do I need to pass them out?
That's fine. Okay. Mr. McConville, is there? Well, let me ask you this, Mayor. When you went back to Wallace Pancher, did you ask them if there was flexibility with their price?
I did ask them that, and I asked them about their openness to moving down, and they stood by their bid.
Okay, and so again, I want to be very clear. I'm speaking for myself. I think I'm speaking for the rest of council. They are a very qualified company. That's not the issue here. But you do see that in Northeast Ohio, that is the most expensive company for University Heights. That is 1.8 square miles. It does not make sense. Do you not see that?
No. I see that it costs a lot because we are a small city, and we're not offering them all of the work that our city does have to offer. Though there are things that are included in the retainer that aren't included in the retainer in other cities, you mentioned earlier that other cities have that $50,000 limit, not cities our size. That's something that we brought upon ourselves and made us less attractive to bid. You go through that Beechwood bid, there are 4 major firms that do the work for most of these cities. And none of them bid on this. They all looked at it. We contacted all of them. None of them were interested in working under these conditions.
That $50,000 issue that you were talking about comes up maybe every 3 years, maybe every 4 years. We're not talking about something that is a make or break contract here. Okay?
Well, regardless of how often it comes up, it was viewed as a factor here. It was viewed as a factor here. It was brought up by Wallace Pancher, and we heard about it from other firms that declined to bid. We heard about it. I don't want to name those firms here, but we talked to some of them, and they declined to bid. That was one of the reasons why.
Ms. Weiser?
Okay. We didn't bring up IT, you did, just for the record. So we're not trying to muddy the waters. You brought it up. Apparently you wanted to muddy the waters.
The muddying the waters had to do with trying to say I didn't say
Let me finish. I have the floor. I have the floor, Mayor. You're not in charge of the meetings. It's a break-in period for all of us. And I respect that.
I'm happy to give us my own lie about what was done.
I'm not lying. I'm not lying because I do know we had an IT committee that reviewed all those documents. Their recommendation went to you, and you kept saying you were negotiating, and we kept extending the contract because you asked for it until it finally got done because council kept asking for it. Check the minutes, refresh your memory. It's there. All right, we didn't bring it up though. Okay. Number 2, if this is an up and down vote on a contract, that's one thing. And we have the right and we do have the ability to do it. I'm not saying Wallace Pantry. I'm saying you do have the right to enter in a professional services agreement to get something done that you claim is now holding up the budget. Do it. That's all I said. Let me be very clear to you. I know you don't want to do it. That's okay. And number 3, I think what I'm hearing convinces me more and more that maybe this contract is not what we should approve. I mean, I've gone back and forth a few times, but more and more what I'm hearing makes me more concerned about the contract.
What do you mean by that? What have you heard that makes you more concerned?
I'm not hearing any change in anything you say about this. You are still only giving very, very little information. Very little. You just keep saying, oh, well, we thought this was the best firm. Why? What specifically would make you want to spend $72,000 a year? You also have said, well, they are not going to get all the work. And I'm going to go back to a statement that I made. And I believe Mr. Rock brought it up, and I think he's pretty accurate on it. If you keep saying that, apparently you know Walter Pancher would be bidding on jobs higher than they could get the bid against other companies, if that's what you're saying. And if that's what you're saying, you're telling me that this is an engineering firm that it actually goes at a very high dollar rate. Do we need it? I don't know. But do we need it is a very good question to ask. If Walter Pancher was all that good, they could bid and get a job anywhere. My bet is probably when they bid, they get a lot of different jobs around this county if they have to bid. But you just said, oh, they can't. Apparently you don't know that, or you do know it. If you do know it, it tells me you already know they're going to come in sky high.
So I want to say a couple things. So before this meeting and before I received the updated contract, I was really hoping that they would come in slightly lower. And I think I said that at the last meeting. I think they're a qualified firm. Most firms, when you tell them, I really want you, they'll come down. That's been my experience because they want your business and they want a long-term relationship with you. So I was actually pretty shocked when they didn't. I didn't think they actually had to come down that much. I was really shocked when they didn't. I was still pretty conflicted up until I got the bids from the other 2 companies. And then I was actually a little upset because when I came into this meeting, I was really hoping that they were interviewed. That was my hope. Because if they were interviewed, that was my clincher that yes, okay, we're gonna get Wallace Pantry. Because it's not like 10 firms came in and gave an RFQ. No, there was only 3. 3 firms I'm gonna interview. Why wouldn't I? I only had 3 law directors that decided to give resumes. Of course I'm gonna interview all 3, right? If 10 apply, I'm not interviewing 10 law directors, but if only 3, I'm interviewing 3, right? But if 3 were not interviewed, it gives me a lot of heartburn. I was really, I have to tell you, because the residents that is my only concern. It's the taxpayers. That is my only concern. And 6,000 keeps getting compounded every single year. And then you have the additional fees on top of it, right? We have a minimum of $200,000 every year. That's a minimum. And if they're already coming in at $6,000, it's probably going to be higher than the $200,000. This is why I'm so conflicted. I was really hoping that the other two firms would have been interviewed. And I get it. I get that it's the mayor's appointment, and I had no problem with that. The mayor should appoint the engineer. I had no problem with that whatsoever. I had a problem with the cost. That's my problem. And I had a problem that the other two firms weren't interviewed. Are there any other comments?
Vice Mayor, this is on the table, correct?
It's up for a vote. What do you mean on the table?
This was tabled last meeting, am I correct?
No, I think it was just read.
Just
I
read?
think it's on for second.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other comments?
We voted on tabling last time. You did.
No, you approved the minutes, so, Ellen? I hate to put the clerk on the spot, but I think you're right, Brian. I think you're right, Councilman King, on that. If we voted to table it, it's on the table. You can't even come off the table without a motion.
Should I give you my minutes?
Well, it's on the agenda. I mean, what Ms. Weiser is saying is from a parliamentary standpoint. If the ordinance was tabled at the last meeting, you would typically make a motion and have a roll call vote on taking it off the table. It's been read once. It's taken off the table. It's before you for second reading. It's on the agenda. The public has notice of it. It can be voted on up or down this evening. It's taken off the table, assuming that that's correct.
It was tabled.
It was tabled. So the parliamentary
Councilman King's memory?
process would be to see if there's a motion to take it off the table. If that motion fails, then it remains on the table. If that motion passes, then it's before you on second reading, and you would go from there.
Well, let me ask this.
Yeah, just to follow up on what the law director said, I would then ask that this be taken from the table and that this be given an up-down vote. I would prefer that it be an upvote, but I think we're in limbo without council making a decision. And I think it would be regrettable if the council were to reject Wallace Panzer and to be our next city engineer. They are certainly our preferred candidate.
Yeah, Mr. Green.
Mr. Macondo, if a vote were to be taken and it was not in the affirmative, could the firm, if another request for an RFQ could the firm resubmit?
If another request for an RFQ out, certainly any firm could submit and they could resubmit.
Thank you.
Mr. Robb?
Although a resubmission of a request for qualifications is something we could do, it's not something we have to do. We have two equally qualified vendors who expressed interest, one who provided a fee, one who provided hourly rates as requested. I don't know LJB. I am familiar with Osborne Engineering. I've worked with them in past lives and their quality work. They're here in Cleveland, the local, And again, we have the fiduciary responsibility to the city. They are equally qualified. They are more than half the cost.
Mayor, let me ask you a question. Are you open to one or both things? To one, going back to Wallace Panther, since they are your first choice, and explaining the situation to them? And or number two, interviewing the other two companies?
In my discussions with Wallace Panther, they viewed the options as being as follows: that the city can accept their proposal, that instead the city could reject the proposal and we can select one of the other firms, provided they're still interested. We re-advertise altogether, which sometimes happens. Or if the goal is a reduced retainer, then we revisit the scope of work to right-size it to something that the city council is interested in, and with the retainer amount that would be reduced accordingly. I'm disinclined to do that. I think that's one of those cases where it may be a penny wise, pound foolish type situation where we take a bunch of things out of the retainer and then we pay a smaller retainer, but then we're going to be billed for a whole lot of other things. Some of those things aren't going to come up every month, I grant, but other ones we could stand, especially with some of the projects that are on the horizon. Everything from new municipal facilities to University Square, we could find ourselves paying a lot for given all of the projects that are going on, given the things that we're working on at John Carroll. And there's a lot of things in the pipeline here at the city. We may be 1.8 square miles, we may be 14,000 or 13,914 people, but we have a lot going on. And being able to budget on a retainer amount that covers a substantial number of things rather than pulling all those items out of the retainer and then being billed hourly for them, I think ends up, puts us in a position where we may have engineering fees that get away from us. I don't want to see that. I would prefer to have the certainty of a higher rate that covers a lot of things than to chisel it away to a lower rate, but then have a bunch of things outside of the retainer that we end up paying a lot for. Now, granted, apparently it works in Fairview, Middleburg, and Rocky River to have fewer things in the scope of work. I suppose that's something that we could go back and look at. I could talk with them about, if we take out certain things, where would that put us? But if we want the current scope of work, then we've got the bid they're coming in at. That is their bid. If that is something that you can find disagreeable and you don't want to work with them because they don't want to move off that number, then I suppose you can reject them and go to one of these other firms. I don't know if they're still interested, and I don't know that we will get something better. And honestly, if I thought we would have ranked them differently and gone with one of those other firms first. My request once again is that you honor the mayor's appointment process, that you approve, after much consideration, the request that we appoint Wallace Panther based upon the RFQ process that we followed. I think they're going to do excellent work here, and if we find that we don't, then they're out of here at the end of the year.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion to take ordinance 2024-01 off the table. Is there a second?
Is that so we can make another no vote?
Yes.
A second?
Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. King? Mrs. Sachs? Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Ms. Wiseman?
No.
Okay, ordinance 2024 is now back on the agenda. It is now on second reading, correct, Mr. Recondo? Okay, I will make the motion to not pass ordinance 2024-01. Is that correct?
Well, I would determine either denial or rejection, one of the two.
To reject authorizing the mayor to enter an agreement with Wallace Pantry Group for the provision of engineering services as city engineer.
Second.
Any comments? Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mrs. Sacks? Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Ms. Weiser?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to go to agenda item B, motion to renew human resource consulting services contract with Clemens Wilson for the year ending December 31st, 2024 for an amount not to exceed $60,000. Not sure who would like to present this.
I can.
Okay, Mr. Kennedy, thank you.
I believe, one correction, I thought the not to exceed amount should be 65.
Not to exceed, I'm sorry, 65, yeah, you're right.
And that's based
That's
on
right.
estimates from Clemens Nelson. So this represents placing a dollar value, actually a not to exceed value on the contract for the year 2024. The contract itself that was approved last year had an auto renewal clause in it, but the not to exceed amount that was in place last year was $48,000. As you're aware, we had to amend that late in the year because of the extra work related to the Clemens Nelson rep, our former rep, who was involved in the labor negotiations. Those will not be taking place this year. We do have a new representative. I think she's superb, and is part of the attachment there, the scope of services. We're hoping we can get back on track and get them to complete a lot of the things that we had initially had designs on improvements to be put in place, particularly as they relate to training of staff members, formal training, upgrades to the policy manual, bring the policy manual back with significant improvements to that, and then some additional work related to a more structured management of workers' comp claims. So the company has proposed implementing the not to exceed amount of $65,000. Right now, we would be limited as to the mayor's spending authority. That would be $15,000, unless either this amount or another amount is approved.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Yeah, Ms. Weiser?
Refresh my memory. If I remember right, the excess was because of the contract negotiations.
Correct.
Okay, so we don't have contract negotiations this year.
Correct.
But they're asking for $17,000 more per year.
Yeah, it's basically $60,000 with a $5,000 contingency in there in case anything
But it's
comes up. But it's about
the 2023 contract base was 48,000.
48.
Pardon?
48. Yes.
48. And then we had to add, what, I think we split the difference with them because of the issue.
Right. About
Okay.
18,000 we agreed to pay.
Okay.
Longer than.
Are we asking them to do more this year in 2024 than we asked them to do in 2023?
I can only speak from my perspective. I think we need
I believe what you're telling me, but I have to process. It seems to me that if one day a week last year was 48,000, well, apparently it wasn't because it was like 60,000 in the end. But my understanding, it was additional billing or additional hours that was put in last year. If they were using the base stuff for the contract negotiations, then why did they charge us additional last year? It's just a question.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
again, off the top of my head, the majority of that excess was related to.
So there was excess.
Yes, that person was involved in labor negotiations.
And this year they should be doing less,
Correct.
but they now are charging us more for the less.
Well, I think they made an estimate as to what wasn't accomplished last year, and our timing to get that work done within this next calendar year, that's the estimate that they gave me as to what would be required.
Thank you.
I think also, Ms. Weiser, they realized what actually needed to be done last year was the first year, and it was an estimate, the $45,000 of what was a possibility, and now they actually have their feet on the ground in the city and see what
Thank you
actually needs to be
for
done.
additional information.
Yeah, there's one other thing which Mr. Candy didn't bring up that plays into the factoring here, and it is this. Our contract for outside labor counsel with Stefanik Iosu expired at the end of 2023. And as of this time, I have not brought that back before you. This is not a commentary on Jeremy Iosu or his firm at all. But what it is a desire to try using Clemens Nelson for some of this work to try them out in the interim, especially as we are looking at getting a new law director here in the next couple of months. And whoever that new law director is may have some ideas with regard to labor counsel and a number of other things. So at this point, I'm inclined to go with Clemens Nelson only, unless we have a matter that comes up in labor that ought not be handled either by Clemens Nelson or the law director. I'm trying not to give new matters to the law director if they're litigation matters. And if that happens, then we can always come back with a proposal for Stefanik Iosu, either for labor generally or for that particular matter. So that said, there is some additional things that we'll be leaning on. There's already one assignment I've given Ms. Visco that might have gone to Jeremy Iosu if he were still under contract with the city.
So, Mayor, I thought that we would be going out to bid for a new labor attorney based on that professional service.
Well, I went back and looked at the ordinance, and statutes are to be read prospectively. And sometime in the next 5 years, we should go out for a new labor council. But that said, it makes sense to me that we wait until we have a new law director to talk about how we do that. Depending on who the law director is, they may want that work. In which case, that's something that can be worked out, between the city and that law director candidate. At this time, I think we're able to work with Clemens Nelson only until we review that matter with whoever our next law director is. And if it makes sense to bring back Stefanik Iosu, if it makes sense to go out for an RFQ on labor, if it makes sense to go some other way at that law director's recommendation, I think that's something that we, should be open to. But in the meantime, we got work here that needs to be done. Clemens Nelson is qualified to do it. There's a little bit more that they're doing right now with regard to an arbitration that was just noticed. And I think that helps justify the additional expense.
So I'm pretty sure it specifically says in the professional service ordinance that union attorneys get bid out. And I think this is a perfect time, especially since the contract is expired, that we go out and bid. I'm fine with having Clemens Nielsen, is that the correct company's name? To do that until we get a new firm, but I think we should, I don't know what the timeline or how we do that, but I think this is the perfect time to go and bid that contract out.
Respectfully, I disagree, and I'll explain why. If we were to do an RFQ for Labor Council, I think the time to do it is before we go back into labor negotiations at the end of this particular 3-year contract. So I think we may want to do that in a year or two before we go back into negotiating contracts with all the unions. But right now, we have contracts that were negotiated by a team of Stefanik Iverson and Clemens Nelson, with the city. So we have Clemens Nelson still here, being able to work on that. If we need Stefanik Iverson to come in on something connected to those contracts, nobody has more familiarity with those contracts than Stefanik Iverson. So now it's not the time. We would be going out to bid, and a prospective bidder is looking at, the occasional enforcement of these other contracts while years out, or it'll be years out before we go back into negotiations for negotiating new CBAs. I would wait on doing the RFQ until we're closer to when it's time to renegotiate new CBAs, in which case I would support going out for an RFQ at that time. But again, in consultation with whoever the new law director is, and in consultation with all of you.
So I'm fine talking to the new law director about what that looks like. I actually tend to disagree, but I actually would love to talk to the new law director in consultation. It's not, we don't have to talk about that right now. It's actually off the agenda items. Okay, Ms. Weiser, are you comfortable with that explanation?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other comments?
I would move to renew the Human Resources Consulting Services contract for the year ending December 31st, 2024, for an amount not to exceed $65,000.
Is there a second? Ms. S. Right, Ms. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mrs. Sacks? Mr. Quinn?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise? Aye. Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Ms. Weiser?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, agenda item C, ordinance 2024-02, amending codified ordinance chapter 1424 entitled Permits and Fees in its entirety and declaring an emergency. So we have discussed this before. Are there any questions? Yeah, Ms. Weiser?
Yeah. This came through Housing and Building, and since Mr. Cheatham is leaving, I guess we'll blame him. He brought to us a very logical reason for increasing those fees, including the fact that some contractors were charging our residents higher fees than we were charging. This also brings balance to the department, the fees coming into that area. And I think he did a very comprehensive job in looking at all of them. And since he's leaving, Mr. Patterson doesn't get beamed by our residents when they have construction thing. We'll just happily blame John as he goes out the door with thanks. But I would encourage the council to approve this tonight on emergency so we can get those fees in because building season is coming.
Are there any questions or comments? Well, I want to thank Mr. Cheatham. I don't think we realized how out of date our fee structure was, and I want to thank Ms. Weiser also for jumping on this. I mean, we were so out of compliance. I think it was embarrassing. But thank you for the hard work, and I know you had to talk to other departments also, so it's very much appreciated. And thank you, Ms. Weiser, also. I will make a motion to pass ordinance 2024-02. Is there a second?
Is that on
On
emergency?
emergency, I'm sorry. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion in here?
Yes. Excuse me, I was a little too close to the microphone there. Yeah, one thing I do want to point out to the council, just meant to make a mental note of, hopefully is wiser for the building committee, is that when we entered into our contract with Safe Build back in 2021, there were certain percentages between that, their compensation model is based upon, when it comes to the core building department services, a percentage split of the money that comes in for permit, the lion's share of which is currently going to Safe Build, and just a small amount, I want to say maybe 92% to 8% going to the city. Now, with that contract was entered with our soon-to-be replaced fee schedule in place. And with that said, there may be a room after we review how this goes to revisit our contract with Safe Build. And I've already let Safe Build know this with respect to what that percentage split should be in the future after we've had some time to look at the numbers, which will be, in the end, this ends up being beneficial to Safe Build, but also to the city.
I don't disagree. The building committee has been looking at the Safe Build contract, as you well know, for a number of months. Oh, one other thing. The one thing that I've noted, and since I'll be doing building for a while, and that 3-year period will come up, I have made a note because the other recommendation was to review these every 3 to 4 years. So we'll get them renewed. I know you could.
Well, I just if I could comment on that. Council's free to enact a provision that requires that kind of review. You can put that in an ordinance. As we thought about that internally, and when I say we, I mean myself and Mr. Cicero, our sensibility about that was that you don't need that. There's nothing that precludes any member of council from bringing this issue to a committee and causing a review of a fee structure at any given time. And so rather than making it a law, since it's already within your powers to do it when you want to do it or when you need to do it, we thought it would best just to not legislate it. I would say the other thing that I'm slightly concerned about is anytime you raise fees like you're doing here, you can't do it without having a reason to do it. And in this case, Mr. Cheatham has pointed out that our fee schedule as it currently exists is too low to adequately fund the building department's operations. And so that provides you with a reason to raise the price that would satisfy any reviewing court that this is not a mere tax or a mere money grab. And that's always going to be a part of the analysis that you're doing and the record that you have to make whenever you are raising these types of fees. So our preference is to make any kind of review process more organic and as a result of need as opposed to by operation of law.
I don't disagree, Mr. McConville, and that's why I said I didn't have any problem. We had, in the committee, we talked about how would we do that, because there also has to be an institutional memory to remember to do it. And one of the things that Mr. Cheatham brought out was it wasn't coming from building to the committees prior to this to look at how fee scales were changing and how the cost to actually run the department was also changing at the same time. And those two things need to sort of correlate. That needs, I think, sort of budgetary, but it's also based on how many we have in any given year and what we're doing in any given year. And that apparently at times can get very busy. The second thing that we were most concerned with is that contractors actually were, and we didn't know this, were actually charging residents as a part of their contracts a higher fee schedule and then paying less to the city. And that's problematic as well. So these are not out of line. They bring us more in line with permit fees for the same type of work throughout the county.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Thomas, will you call the roll for suspension of rules?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mrs. Sacks? Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Rock? Aye. Ms. Weiser?
Aye.
And on the main motion?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Ms. Weiser?
Aye.
Okay. Ordinance passes. Chief Rum, or Chief Perko, the motion allowing fire department to seek bids for RFPs for fire department wellness program.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. This is part of the ARPA funding, the firefighter first responder grant that we applied for, council approved in December of 2022. We were awarded $204,600 back then. Again, the last year we came before you to go out to bid for medical examinations. We're in the process of scheduling those for February of this year. This portion of the grant is mainly on the nuts and bolts of what we applied for, which is for the behavioral and mental health component. The goal is to incorporate mental, physical health aspects into the workforce of our members. Some ideas along the lines of stress management and resiliency, mental health screenings, and we're seeking your approval to go out to bid to get clinicians that are trained specifically in dealing with public safety providers in stress management, resiliency, well-being, and behavioral health in the workforce.
Okay, thank you. When does the money need to be spent by?
The grant performance period concludes at the end of this year, December 31st.
Okay, when do you expect to, in February, you expect to use the funds?
As soon as we were awarded the bid, we would get moving on and starting to get the services going.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Ms. Weiser?
Is this common throughout all the departments now? Just out of curiosity.
Wellness training or this specific grant?
This specific.
Not a lot of departments in the region were awarded this, but some were. Behavioral health and wellness and public safety is definitely becoming a major focal point.
Thank you.
I'm glad you awarded the grant. I know I'm surprised actually other fire departments didn't apply for it because the ARPA funds were readily available. I'll make a motion allowing the fire department to seek the bids.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. King. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mrs. Sacks? Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Ms. Weiser?
Aye.
Thank you as usual. Agenda item E, motion authorization to extend current minimum contract for service department temporary labor for Minutemen. Yeah, Mr. Pennington?
Yes, this is a opportunity for the city to extend the contract with Minuteman Incorporated. We did our a good portion of our labor in regards to our leaf collection and leaf pickup this season and in the last 3 years. They provided us rates of $20.02 per hour for 2024, $26.02 per hour for 2025, and $21.24 per hour for 2026. There's also a small amount of money included in this extension to cover the overruns we had from the 2021 through 2023 seasons. In doing this, I'm asking for a 2023 extension of $22,455, a 2024 amount not to exceed $32,708, 2025 not to exceed $33,668, and 2026 not to exceed $34,660. This contract extension goes along with the lines of what we did in the past. When we originally went into contract with Minutemen, we did this contract numerous times, with Minutemen being the only bidder we had on the project. So with that, at this point, I would recommend that council authorize the extension.
Mr. Pennington, the 32,000, 33,000, and 34,000 correlates to the hourly rates?
It's the hourly rate with their weekly administrative fee also included.
Okay, and what other companies do this in the city? I remember when Mr. Corney went out and tried to bid it out and nobody else came back.
That was the problem, is we had no one else bidding out this type of services for the labor for these type of workers coming into our city. So with that, and with the good experience we've had over the last 3 years with Minutemen, we, at this point, recommend just extending the contract.
And you haven't had issues with people not showing up to work, or?
There's an occasion. What we do is we have 8 weeks of work. We're permitted per union contract with the workers for up to 5 workers per day. In many cases, we did have 5 workers per day this season. There were a couple of days where we had one person maybe not show up, but we also then called Minutemen, and they got someone out later that day to fulfill the remainder of that day's work.
And they have background checks and everything?
That is all handled by Minutemen. We don't handle them as far as background checks. These people are not going into the backyards. They're simply breaking leaves on the tree lawns.
So you don't require background checks?
No.
Ms. Hauser?
I'm confused. I don't know if you can answer this, maybe the mayor can. It seems to me that last year, this is pre you coming in, Mr. Pennington, in 22, wasn't there a thing that we couldn't keep up with the leaves because we couldn't get the part-time workers from Minutemen? They didn't have the laborers. I remember that being discussed at council meetings, and there was an issue, which I don't know how much did we pay him in 22. It was a whole thing about the leaf pickup was a disaster that year, and the statement was that Minuteman could not produce the people because they didn't have people who were willing to work. I'm 99% sure of that. So, yeah.
Back then, there was a number of part-time service department employees, regular employees different than Minutemen. That may be where the difference was. I'm not sure, but I remember we don't have any right now, right?
We have no part-time employees right now.
So I think we had a few, but we kept losing those employees.
Yeah, I remember the contract was like $98,000 for 3 years.
Right.
See, this is what happens when you hang out in the audience too long. And you remember these odd things. I'm okay with it. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, what happens if they don't produce the people? We don't pay this amount, correct?
That is correct. We have them for 8 weeks, and within those 8 weeks, we have these maximum hourly rates.
So I would assume the last run through on the contract, it didn't work out to $98,000 over 3 years, because apparently, according to what the public was told, they were not available to do it. Okay, I just needed to mention that.
If I may offer, we had no issues this year at all. As a matter of fact, one day we had 6 guys show up.
That's good. Yeah, well, that's
so we had no issues with their laborers this year.
Yeah, we didn't have. I remember that this year there wasn't a lot of complaints. There's always complaints, but there weren't as many complaints.
Okay. Is there a motion to authorize to extend the Minutemen contract? Ms. Hales? Is there a second?
Second.
Just for purposes of the record, I think we should note the amount, which is $103,491 pursuant to the memo submitted by Mr. Pennington, and that includes the 2023 amount of $2,455, just so that that's clear in our minutes.
Do you need to repeat that, or is what you said sufficient?
No, as long as you'll have it in the minutes. There's no objection to that.
No objection.
Is there any comments? Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. Sachs? I'm so sorry. Mr. King?
Aye.
Mrs. Sachs? Mr. Goody?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Ms. Weiser?
Okay, that motion passes. Is there a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing legal proceedings and real estate matters?
That works.
After we talk about reports of standing committees and taking what action thereon?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mrs. Sachs? Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mrs. White?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Ms. Weiser?
Aye.
Okay. Now reports of standing committees, building and housing.
We've got to get a meeting scheduled. There was a Google doc out there. We're going to have to redo it. We're going to have to redo it. Kelly, I'll send it out. We've got a number of things for the agenda to cover. We'll miss Mr. Cheatham at our next building meeting. Thank you for all your work with us. And we look forward to working with Mr. Patterson.
And thank all of you too. Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Community outreach,
No report, Vice Mayor.
economic development,
No report.
finance, no report, recreation,
Is it a recreation committee meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m.?
Safety. Is there anybody that would like to speak on Ms. Marshall's behalf? Okay, service and utilities. There was an excellent meeting tonight, and there will be another one scheduled to discuss the results of the presentation. Now, there is no report. We'll now, is there a motion to enter into executive session?
Okay, yeah, I would run through 12 and 13,
Okay.
and then when you come out, we're not anticipating any action this evening. But when you come out, you want to remain on the agenda.
City Hall.
Reports of special committees and taking of action thereon. Any unfinished and miscellaneous business? We're going to move to executive session.